Good morning, Radhika Dudhat Pereira and all the participants. A hearty welcome to one and all. Some of the today's successful companies, they began as startups. For example, Microsoft, Facebook, McDonald's, and many more. Now, startups face very high uncertainty and failures during the first few years. If you recall, the dot-com companies of 1990s all went bust, except a few like Amazon and eBay. Now, to create a successful startup, you really need a very sturdy legal framework and very effectively drafted contracts. You need approvals, licenses, business model, business plan, which will outline the company's vision statement, mission statement, its marketing and management strategies. Then it will require details about how the funds will be raised, hiring of key personnel, location, and there are various contracts to be drafted. For example, the key personnel, the employees, the sale and purchase agreements, the vendors agreements, then you need transportation agreements, then there are taxes, immunities, then dispute settlement, and much more. Now, today we are extremely privileged and fortunate that we have with us a very eminent person, Advocate Radhika Dudhat Pereira, the partner in the company, which is a legal firm, which is the pride of our country, the most eminent firm, law firm in the country, ShardulAmarchandMangaldas. On behalf of all, I request her to enlighten us on this very fascinating subject. So she's here with us for 2 days from 10 to 12, and I extend a very, very warm welcome to her on behalf of Nari Gursahani Law College, Dr. L.H. Hiranandani College, and all the participants who have assembled. I'm sure that the participants who are there for this webinar are going to be fruitfully engaged with her. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Sorry to interrupt, Radhika, ma'am. But before we can start, I would really want to give our participants a brief outline of, your professional career. I mean, I want to read your CV to the participants so that they know who is the resource person for the day, the eminence of the resource person. So please allow me to read your CV before we can start with the session. May I, ma'am?
May I just say one thing?
Yes,
I think, really that is not necessary. I'm just simply saying that because let us get into the topic right now. The most beautiful part about this morning is, to be able to come here and share, some of the understanding that I have gathered over the years in regarding to this sphere. It's very kind of you to say that, but I think we can start directly.
Sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. Okay? That's really kind of you. Yeah. That's really kind of you. We can start directly, ma'am. Sure, so I invite you to start the session. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Radhika, yes. I'm sorry to interrupt. You have always supported the college in ways more than one. And I think we know you, but the participants need to know you. So if you please, with your permission, with folded hands, if you just allow Sambita to speak very briefly about you, we'll be very happy. Just 2 minutes.
Okay,
Thank
fine.
you, Radhika.
Sure,
thank you,
thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Okay. Radhika Pereira, ma'am, she has done her graduation. She's a law graduate from Mumbai University, and she's done her post-graduation from University of Cambridge and Harvard University. Now, she is a partner of ShardulAmarchandMangaldas Company, and she has worked on wide range of transaction works in the area of regulatory advisory, real estate, intellectual property rights, projects and project financing, corporate advisory, and documentation and legal risk management as a document and legal risk management advisory. The focus of her work over the years has been structured transactions, provides strategy, documentation, and negotiation in respect to complex and sensitive transactions or situations across industry verticals. Now, over the years, she has developed the practice of legal risk management to assess and advise in the management of legal risk, whether it is regulatory, contractual, or other litigation risk. And she has advised several complex transactions requiring understanding of corporate governance, insolvency law, environmental laws, intellectual property rights, data protection, telecom, cyber, and other regulatory laws. She is also advising on setting up businesses in India and providing compliance and regulatory framework applicable for business and risk management for the same. She is a part of one of the core group committee established by the government of Maharashtra to make recommendations to the state government on legal issues relating to privatization. She is the director of boards of listed and unlisted companies. She is also the faculty and guest speaker at various educational, institutional, and business forums to speak on wide range of subjects, including legal, commercial, and self-development related topics. She also studies and speaks on Indian Shastras. So with this short introduction of the resource person for the day, I welcome her once again, and over to you, Radhika ma'am. The session is yours.
Thank you very much. Very grateful to be here, and it's always a privilege to interact with your college, um, with your management, and also particularly for me, it's a great privilege to interact with Professor Chandi Ramani. It's always been a joy, and her commitment to education, to excellence is just remarkable and always awe-inspiring. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm going to take you through this presentation, but I want to share with you the approach that I have to this presentation. So, over the years, one thing that I have realized is while as lawyers and, coming from different professional fields, we look at law, as something in terms of requirements for business, for even uh, family or personal related issues and others. It is extremely important to really understand and approach law from a framework always in regard to the ultimate object or the purpose for which we are looking at it. As a student, I often found that if I just read law, it became very cumbersome and tiring. But if I looked at it from a point of view of what I'm going to use it for, it always was very interesting. And so with the same perspective, I'm going to share with you the overview of this, the legal aspects of startup.
रेयान आवाज नको हा?
One moment. One moment. Yeah. So when we are talking about startups, I want, even before this particular slide, I'd like to just give a framework. Okay? Let us imagine, or each one of us, has as an idea, something that we are passionate about. It is something that we may want to do. It could be anything. I want to start a plant nursery business. I want to start a manufacturing of a specific molecule, in regard to certain nutraceuticals that may be there. I want to start a business relating to fashion designing. I could be doing many, many different things, right? Now, in regard to each of these startups, what I have noticed in regarding to all the entrepreneurs, naturally they are highly motivated beings, people with great amount of passion, great amount of energy to be able to put into action all that they have thought and planned. So typically speaking, first we need to know who we are dealing with when we are talking about startups. So startups can be either be people who are, very new to business, and yet they have great ideation, great drive, great passion for what they are doing, and they're good at what they are doing, and hence they want to set up a business around it. Or they could be people who are very experienced in industry, and now want to do something on their own. And so they leave the industry to start up something on their own. So there are various different scenarios. So to begin with, when we are looking at startups as a concept, and how what we're looking at a legal framework, the first most important thing that we need to understand is who are we dealing with, because we are here to support our clients. And when I say our clients, it could also be we are here to be able to give inputs to people, and depending on their understanding, their maturity, their depth in terms of just understanding the vast framework of law that exists, we need to approach them and understand them. So we look at two situations, and I think that is a good starting point for this particular session. First is, how do we really communicate to an entrepreneur, the first and foremost, the necessity of having a legal framework. Because typically speaking, I've noticed whenever people do something because they have to do it, or they are forced to do it, it lacks, it really speaking lacks interest. And because it lacks interest, the work done is always haphazard. Whether it is the legal framework, that means regulatory approvals, contracts, whether the IP framework that they do, it's all over the place, because they've never really understood the significance of it. And because they don't understand the significance of it, the interest given to something is not there. This is the same thing with everything. If I cook a dish in my kitchen without any interest, then it's going to turn out another way. If I do it with a lot of interest, it's going to turn out another way. If you study for the exams just to get marks or pass, the results are going to be one way. If you study law for the sake of understanding law and knowledge about it, your results are going to be a different way, not only in your exams, but in your performance as a lawyer as well. So interest governs it. So the first thing and important thing to start with entrepreneurs is first to give them an overview. And I'm speaking to all of you as potential lawyers, or people who will be advising people or using this knowledge in their own work and practice, right? So when you look at this framework, it is very important to understand first principle of law, which is ignorance of law is not an excuse. So whether I know law, don't know law, whether I understand it, don't understand it, that is never an excuse if I have been caught for non-compliance, or I suffer severe repercussions on account of the fact that my contract is not properly worded. So it really doesn't matter whether I understand a law or I engaged, unfortunately, a lawyer who didn't take care or interest in my work. It really doesn't matter. I will suffer the consequences, disregard to my intentions, whether it is just, not just, it doesn't really matter, because law is there to protect those, provided the facts are presented properly, they're documented properly, there's a framework in place which is proper, and all of that, right? So the first thing we tell every person, whether it's a startup of a freshly and a new entrepreneur starting business, or somebody who has a great experience, is the framework and the foundation of the legal status that you will build on is extremely important. The second thing is even the sensitivity to areas of things. At least I need to know. Now, when I'm taking you through this particular thing, and although ma'am said that, we are going to be here for 12 o'clock, I don't want to do that to you. So I'm just telling you right now that we will get into the presentation roughly at 20 past 10, actual presentation. We will finish it I'll try and finish it in 45 minutes to an hour, and then we'll do the question answer sessions. So the fundamental and the most important thing that we need to keep in mind is that the importance of law is to be made and to be understood by beings, to say that it is there, it's my safety net, and it is the processes of legal framework which will eventually one, protect me from any kind of eventuality which may be unforeseen, which would be there. That's one. And second, my understanding and taking interest in all of this will create an organization which is a far more mature organization driven by processes, and hence people will be far more inclined to engage with me for a simple reason. They will consider me a person of taking respectful of their commitments in the contract, as also under the legal framework. So once people understand this, their approach towards the legal framework becomes extremely different. So with this approach, we are now starting up, right? So when you look at a startup, the first thing that we need to understand is, although there are certain laws that will be applicable across, for example, if you're in a service industry versus a manufacturing industry, if you're a professional versus an individual family house, depending on certain generics, there will be certain frameworks which will be applicable in any case. However, if we want to build a structure which is very specific to a structure, we need to understand the nature of the business and a lot of details which are particular. So the first thing that like we would always do to be able to make the best diagnosis of what this client needs or what this business needs is, first of all, assessing the information. So first I look at what is the nature of the business that we are dealing with. What is the so when I say nature of the business, it enables me to understand the regulatory framework that governs around it. For example, when I'm looking at agri businesses, looking at businesses which are connected with agriculture versus when I'm looking at mining sector, or when I'm looking at telecom versus when I'm looking at, say, blockchains and cryptocurrencies. In certain cases, they are very new age technologies where the regulatory framework around it is just being formulated. Whereas in certain cases, there is a great deal of regulatory framework for the industry itself, So when you are looking at media and entertainment, say mining sector, when we are looking at agriculture business, when you're looking at steel business or IT or whatever, there's a regulatory framework, or telecom, which is connected with this. Now, how does this regulatory framework get into being? Because there are different ministries that are looking after different businesses. So first of all, we need to understand which is the ministry that looks after this particular business or a particular business that we are dealing with. Because that ministry is the primary ministry which will be giving us the regulatory framework in regard to the specific business. Then comes the part relating all the allied industries and allied ministries, which may be in regard to different sectors, right? So when we are looking at, we first identify what ministry we come under. The next thing we do is we look at whether or not this particular sector is a service sector or is it a manufacturing sector? Because in case of both of these, the plethora of laws which govern them are very distinct and different. Some of them are common, but there is a large part which is very specific to a manufacturing sector, and the thresholds and requirements are far more stringent, say, for example, in regard to even, say, environmental norms or labor legislations, which are very particular to those. Service sector, which also has employment related and labor related laws, but they are very different, or even the environmental laws apply to a service sector, but they are very different. Next is in terms of what is the entity which is actually going to be conducting this business. So whether is it a proprietorship, whether it's a partnership, whether it's an LLP, whether it's a company, what is that company which is actually looking at this particular business? In certain cases, they could be even a startup already of an existing business. So you already have a company which is in existence, and you may be having an affiliate of it or a subsidiary of it, which will be bringing together this particular entire business. So we need to understand everything. So although you may have a private company, it may be a subsidiary of a listed company which may be doing work. And so that the regulatory framework, how it is to be done, the reporting norms, all that is very different and needs to be considered in terms of the parent as well as the subsidiary. So the framework is extremely important. Next comes from a tax angle. Whenever we are doing a business, we need to understand, first of all, the business itself and the tax angle that is applicable to it. So the tax laws are sometimes very important, and they play a very important role in making many decisions. in terms of the structure of the business, the very manner in which the business gets detailed in terms of relationships between different parties, because there is a different tax implication in regard to all of that. So as we know, taxes are direct taxes and indirect taxes. Indirect, you have the incidence of GST. This particular, there are very important nuances in that regard that need to be understood in terms of the businesses, and as well of the direct taxes. Now, in regard to startups, one of the important things that we need to remember is that just as a lawyer is important to a startup, so is a tax consultant and a finance team. So the three essential ingredients of a business which support a business, in addition to, of course, the entrepreneurs itself, their own teams that they have, is essentially the three. Just as we have placed importance on the legal framework, the similar importance has to be put on the framework relating to tax, and similarly in regard to finance. Because if there is even a little bit of lack or weakness in any of these three systems, the repercussions to the company, to the business, to the management, and to the directors or to the founders is very serious. And so it is very important that the fundamentals of all of these three things are very important, and these three things should be taken into account while we are making a business plan itself. Because cost allocation in terms of a business, when we are looking at, is not only to be looked at from a standpoint of, oh, I want to set up a business, so I will be doing this, and I need to have the basics of the business in place, but the essentials that are required in terms of legal, tax, finance, and the next being HR, are all very important to be able to have the basic fundamentals of the tax implications also. Next is incorporation and setting up of the entity. So once we know the kind of business we are doing, which is a vehicle which will be the best, which, so sometimes if the business is such that it is going to be primarily cash rich in its own self, in the sense cash generating in its own self, where the money gets generated by the business itself, and where immediately you don't see necessity for either particularly equity contribution coming from elsewhere, you may even choose to do an LLP, because it's a much more simpler structure compared to a company, and it will also, while the compliances and regulatory requirements are much lower in terms of thresholds, yet it gives a very clear protection in terms of a limited liability in respect to the founders which set up this particular entity. So you may choose that, but wherever we are looking at growing the particular business, and we are looking at bringing in valuations to investors that are coming in, then company is the most preferred vehicle that could be chosen. It is also important to remember that an LLP always can be converted into a company. So it isn't that if you just stick to one particular vehicle, you cannot change that into a company, but it is something that one will take into account, right? I'm just going to spend a little bit time on this overview. The rest we will go a little much faster, because the fundamentals once understood, it would be much easier later. So once we decide setting up of the company, now one of the other things that becomes very important in deciding what is not only in regarding to what is the entity we set up, but also where we set up this entity, because the state regulations that govern a particular organization and a business are also something relevant to be looked at. Because when we talk about governing law, it is one, the ministry that governs it. Number two, what are the central regulations that govern this particular business? What are the state regulations that govern the particular business? What are the local laws that govern the business? Municipal laws that govern the business, and so on and so forth, right? This framework is very important. So the state and the local laws are very important. Like you may have seen, all of you, during the process of this COVID, there was not only laws that were come out with Ministry of Home Affairs, which were on a central level, but different states also very clearly came out with their own regulations. And as a result, it was not only necessary to know the state law, but the central law, but also the state law which governed particularly all of us, the businesses and so on and so forth. So the knowledge of state laws is very important. Likewise, even jurisdictions. Because of certain tax implications, a lot of times companies have been set up even offshores, where the business gets set up offshores and then the entity out here is providing it services, or it's doing a business on its behalf here. So from a tax angle, this becomes of a great importance. What is important to understand is we need to know any subject when we are studying it a little bit, of course, in depth, and have good professionals who understand that area. Because I may just do something for one reason, because it helps me for one reason, but on the overall, it may not be such a conducive thing. For example, a particular state may be very useful in terms of incentives it may give, but from a standpoint of, say, labor, or from standpoint of business development, it may not be. So I might be looking at, say, IT, and say, let's say a particular state gives me great benefits, but I should also see whether or not for my IT business, will I get the skilled people living by close by, or will I need to be in another state where the skilled labor in regard to, or workmen in that regard, are naturally and easily available. Because if I don't do that, then the cost of employment to me for employees may be larger, because I'll need to provide them accommodations or at least an allowance in that regard. So a lot of things go about. So tax implications are thought about in terms of a site of business. What is also thought about is in regard to the framework of the state laws that get applicable to this, right? The next comes in terms of the legal compliance framework. Whenever we look at a legal compliance framework, you have to, as I said, we have to look at the ministry that is involved for the business, the central laws, the state laws, the local laws that get looked at. And then you look at the entire framework of all of this, including, what are the contracts that will be required for business, what are the tax requirements that are there for business. I'll give you a small example. For companies which are offshores, and when they set up businesses overseas, when you have Indian companies which are doing businesses here, the subsidiaries of that companies, which may be a 100% company. One of the important things that the companies used to earlier argue is to say that, we have an overseas company, which is the main company, and we are just giving some business here, but the business is being entirely booked in the overseas entity. The tax regulatory authorities said, but no, for you, the control of business is also happening in India. So because India is the seat of control, where the decision making is happening in India, you can't say just because I book a invoice, say in an offshore entity, be it Singapore or Netherlands or wherever it may be, in Mauritius, that is not enough, and hence you are taxable in India, right? So it is not enough just to read the letter of law and followed by the letter. It's important that the substance is also followed and understood, and that is extremely important. So when the legal framework, when we assess, and it makes a very huge difference, because if our legal framework is a very robust framework with proper, well thought through tax structuring, the effective tax paid by the company can be a very efficiently governed, whereby the company's profitability also increases considerably. So these are things that we need to very clearly look at. We'll come into the contractual compliances, because that's something that needs to be understood on its own. The next part is intellectual property right. Now, what happens is, in every business, first of all, we need to understand what is intellectual property. So as lawyers, we obviously know property essentially is of two kinds, tangible and intangible. Tangible is that property which essentially you can, which is connected under the Transfer of Property Act, which is essentially there, as well as a few other acts which govern tangible property. And there are certain norms that are applicable to tangible property. In respect to almost all tangible property, those documentation, in terms of duly stamping of those documentation and registration of those documentation is essential. In case of intangible property, stamp duty implications in terms of any transaction in that regard is definitely necessary, but it is not necessary to register those particular documents. So in terms of intangible properties, where you have stocks, shares, bank accounts, mutual funds, we have receivables that are there. The in the basket of intellectual property rights, it's essentially what the name says. Anything that gets derived of from by the use of one's intellect or skill gets covered under this property, and also that which gets generated by by our work over a period of time. So you have intellectual properties like copyrights, trademarks, patents, geographical indicators, designs are there. As also a goodwill is an intellectual property which one looks at. So each of these have a whole universe of its own, right? How it is born, how it gets recognized, what is the lifespan of each intellectual property, how do you register it in India, are there international agreements like TRIPS and others which enable reciprocity vis-a-vis other jurisdictions? What are those benefits that you get? All of this is to be understood and understood in depth before really engaging in any of this, so that we make sure that our intellectual property is as is necessary. Second, even in terms of the names that I have, my branding, my logos, my tagline, whatever that I may generate and create, what is it that is applicable in this regard, we need to understand. And lastly, the legal documentation in respect to everything. My own business, my own infrastructure, I could have employment and employees, I could have internal policies, I will have my own code of conduct for my inner working. For my outer working, I will have business contracts and so on and so forth. So now we will look at starting, right? So some of the stuff that I've said here earlier will be applicable for ahead. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just walk you through this presentation, and I'll always give you a minute or two to go through the presentation slides so that you can read as well, and then I'll talk about it, because I really don't find it engaging to sit and read from the slides. So if that's okay with you, if you will just take a minute to read this. Right, so some of this we have already spoken right now, but this becomes very important when we are looking at businesses, because we are always looking at creation of this particular framework. And why does this framework really become important, I'll also tell you, is if you look at any business, why do businesses succeed? Okay, if you look at, take a general survey of the businesses that have been successful, the few key elements of those businesses, if somebody said that give me 3 things that make the businesses successful, the first and foremost is the ideation of the business itself, meaning what the business is about, the products that come out in that regard, the way in which that particular business is run, where especially when you have service related industry. So naturally, the business itself, what it stands for and what it is, the reason for it being set up itself is crux. The second most important thing is the people who are driving it. The people who drive it decide and determine how successful that business will be. Whether they have the right attitude, the right know-how for the business, the knowledge for the business, the drive for the business, proper discipline, how to conduct themselves and the business, and their own work ethics, both in terms of how they are working and the ethics which are there necessary that they have in terms of the manner in which they do business, whether they cut corners, whether they don't, whether they care about the law or they just completely don't care about the law, no care attitude in terms of structures, all of that. And the last part is the essential framework of the business, which is what we are talking about. Legal is one aspect of it. The other we spoke about was in regarding to taxes, finance. This framework is what holds the business together. So I would say that the product itself is critical, because without a good product, you can't really do anything at all. The one who does this is extraordinarily important, because they are the one who are driving that entire business. If you have a great team spirit, if you have great processes in place, things can move and grow massively and beautifully. Maruti is one amazing example where the product is very good. The company is based on robust principles, its network, its distributor chain, its service centers, up to the very end, which means products starting in the factory to the product in the customer's home and the servicing of it. It is a seamless, a very beautifully set up and very cost effective. So if you look at one of those examples, you will say, okay, this is wonderful. This setup really works, right? So this is one of it. So now when we are talking about people who are doing work and their business and their professional skills matter, of course, but also their reputation matters. Why? Because reliability is the most important factor. When you're looking at any business, from a consumer point of view, they will look at how good or reliable the product is. But from a bankability, banks who are going to give you debt or capital to be able to raise money for the business, and from the investors who are going to invest in you, what they want is a reliable team of management and professionals driving the company. So this reliability that is there is the fundamental thing. And that's why a name like Tata will command so much respect, even whether they put it on a bottle of water, or whether they will come up with steel, or whether they will come up with a Westside or a Titan or whatever. Why? Because they have not only the products, but they were reliable over a period of time to consistently deliver what they are supposed to deliver, not only to as the product, but to the stakeholders also, including investors and their financiers and so on and so forth. So when we are looking at product, when we are looking at startups, essentially all of this essentially matters, right? We just spoke about the legal entity and the things that really matter as far as the legal entity goes. Law also provides a framework, especially when you look at the regulatory framework under FEMA, which is for foreign exchange related regulations, where RBI, which is the Bank of India, which really looks at the entire fiscal aspect of the money as well as the foreign exchange. It's come up with a legal framework. That legal framework is essentially a framework which enables companies to make transactions that are cross-border. Now, why do companies require cross-border transactions? Companies require cross-border transactions because you need to be able to buy raw materials from overseas. You need to be able to sell your products overseas. You may require technology know-how from overseas. You may be requiring to make royalty payments overseas. You may be having people coming in from overseas to give your expertise. So when people come in, there are a whole lot of issues which come in with the visas of it and so on and so forth. There may be foreign directors sitting on the board of companies. Likewise, they also have a methodology of companies which are, for example, very known or very having great businesses overseas. When they want to look at and explore the possibility of setting up business in India, there are various other options also. They can come and set up a branch office or a liaison office or a project office. These are very flexible mechanisms where you come in to do only a very specific task, which may come only to either liaison and build up business, or it may come up to do a branch to just about take the orders, and then all the business gets done with the overseas entity. Or for a project, if I'm doing a large oil and gas project offshores, And if I want to have some company like an Halliburton come in and do that project work over offshores, and I require for it almost like a team of 50 people, I need my equipment to come in, everything. So I'll set up a project office. I will have a legal framework, but that legal framework is much easier to be dealing with, and it will be monitored by RBI in terms of what is the money coming in, going out, and all of that. The one other aspect of it, which is very beautiful about these offices, is it is convenient to set it up also and convenient to wind up also. Because whenever we are looking at all the entities, one of the very important criteria that we haven't spoken about, but which should always be looked at, is the lifespan of what you want to do. If the lifespan of something that you want to do is short, then you may wish to look at other options other than a company, because setting up a company, while it may take you 15-20 days to set it all completely, to wind up is going to take you almost a year or two. It's not an easy thing. Okay, so it is something which is which requires a great deal of a thought that will be necessary in order to be able to look at businesses, and this is very important. Now going ahead, okay, when we're looking at type of companies, these days law even enables a one-person company, you have a private company, and you have a public company which are there, and you know the essential overall ingredients of it. The entire overall ingredients of it are very specific. The Ministry of Corporate Affairs essentially looks at it. If you are a public company, then a whole plethora of other laws which is governed. So essentially in a public company, and you have a listed and unlisted companies. In case of listed companies, you also have the stock exchange to look at on which you're listed. The Securities Exchange SEBI board, that is Securities Exchange Board, is an agency which looks after all the laws which will be governed in respect to companies. And so all companies have to see what is applicable to me under the Companies Act, what is applicable to me under the SEBI regulations. This is a very important thing that we need to always keep in mind. If you're listed, then of course there are listing guidelines that are also applicable. So from a corporate law standpoint, the key parts that are very important to understand, first in terms of a business, is under the Companies Act, what is my obligation, responsibilities, liabilities, and requirements. What is required under the SEBI regulation, what is required under the listing regulations if it is applicable to me, what is required under the RBI regulation as far as I am concerned, because when I'm doing business, RBI also has an important role to play in it. Apart from this, then you will look at which ministry I come from, what is the regulatory framework that is applicable to me. So now we are looking at raising capital, and this is very important because the object of the business is to make money, right? Eventually, the first and foremost business objective is to make money, and raising capital is an essential part of it, right? I'd just like to add one part here. Actually, the next time I'll make sure that is included here. You also have company which is not for profit company, a Section 8 company, where for doing work which may be either charitable in nature, or which may be work where you're doing your CSR activities, or it may be work where you want to do research and R&D kind of work, where the idea is to do a lot of work, develop a lot of IP, or and to have great tax benefits and exemptions. You can look at a Section 8 company as well, which will get covered under the various kind of companies as an option. And this is an option to what used to be originally, trusts under the Trusts Act, or societies which were formed. But trusts essentially, so if you look at the regulatory framework of a trust, where you have a private trust or a public trust, you have societies where a lot of people with a common objective comes and formulates societies, and then they govern it, especially when you have associations of people and others. They sometimes function as societies as well. Then you have the Section 8 companies, which are essentially doing a specific objective, with a specific work, In Section 8 company, the beauty is even if any kind of money is made, profit is made, it gets plowed in back into that particular company itself for its use. So that's one company that we need to keep in mind. Then of course, raising capital. Now, from here onwards, okay, I'm going to demarcate this particular remainder presentation, and I'm going to say we have now roughly around, I'll say we have half an hour left to speak, right? So I'm going to divide this half an hour now into three components, okay? First part is relating to the entire financing aspect of the entire business. The second part is really financing and just a framework part of the business. The second part we'll talk about is the operational part of the business. And the third part we will talk about the risks and the regulatory risks and the things that any entrepreneur needs to keeping a long-term perspective. So on the first part of the business, first part of this section, let us look at how money is raised, right? So if I want to have money, the three aspects of raising capital, actually one more thing can be added here, which is by the self. I can put in my own money, right? So when I'm looking at equity, I can also bring in my own personal equity into the thing. So there is equity and there is debt. So I can bring in money by myself, or I can raise money from outside where other people will come in and be co-shareholders with me. So let's just begin with debt first. When you're looking at debt, what is it that we are doing? We are taking a loan, right? So the loan is based on the credit worthiness of the entity that is taking the loan, as well as the promoter or the founder which is backing this particular entity. Why? Because if the entity can't repay, then the promoter will need to guarantee it. Now, loans, as we know, are essentially secured loans or unsecured loans. When you have secured loans, they are typically secured by something which has value and which is tangible value, which can be amortized, a value which can actually be realized. So I can secure it by the receivables that I have. I can secure it by any of the instruments which may be there, like LCs I may have. I may have guarantees against for my businesses which may be there. It may be stock which I may have the machinery, I may have land, I may have buildings, I may have lots of things, right? Or I may have shares that may have. So I can be secured by assets. They have to be backed by assets, whether they are tangible assets or intangible. Or it's unsecured debt. Now, unsecured debt will completely rely on one, the credibility that is coming into base. It will be the credibility of the business and credibility of the person who's driving the business. Typically, unsecured debt is the debt which will be given as, for on working capital basis sometimes, or it may be given as private loans and things like that. Unsecured will, of course, be to a much smaller extent. In case of secured, because it's backed by assets which are of a value larger than the loan that is given, the quantum can be much more. The problem really happens, we'll come to the problem in a minute. Then there are personal guarantees where the promoters or the founders will be giving guarantees to be able to make sure that the loan that is coming in is guaranteed because of the credit worthiness of the person who's guaranteeing it, right? And these guarantees, we have to understand, once given a guarantee, it is the person in the event, the company is unable to, or the entity is unable to pay it, then you step in the shoes of the debtor and you have to make good the payment that is required to be made. Then you have the debt instruments. All the debt instruments which are there, like debentures may be there. You may have certain bonds which may be there. Debentures and bonds and other debt instruments essentially are instruments which carry certain rights. Now, those rights in the hierarchy, we have to understand, whenever there is, for example, a situation of liquidity crunch, okay, or let's say there is a liquidation, insolvency, whatever money that comes in will always flow or will have a trickle effect in the manner in which there is a hierarchy which is there. Hierarchy of what takes precedence to pay the money over what. And that is something that is to be understood. So when you have workmen, you have employees, you have dues, you have financial institutions which have paid the money. These take always precedence, or regulatory dues, taxes, direct and indirect taxes. These will take precedence over other debtors, which may be there, which may be, contractual obligations that you have to fulfill, payments otherwise to be made for businesses and others. They will always take a backseat. And hence, a lot of times lenders secure themselves with instruments which are give them that extra power. Certain debt instruments, or even debt, these days when we saw, with the advent of the Insolvency Act, we see that so many new structures came in, right? And that's a very beautiful and different area. But wherever there are problems where a company said, okay, I'd like to restructure the debt, I'd like to come up with a company restructuring plan, all of that. Why? Because the situation became a completely unviable situation. Because the amount that the company was bleeding for payments, repayments in terms of interest and dues was not happening on time properly. And because of the interest and the debt burden, the company started buckling under the pressure and cracking up, and the systems went haywire, and now the company is in a completely red zone, right? So it started defaulting in the obligation. So with debt, one has to be very careful on how much one takes, on what terms it takes, what are the conditions of essentially calling for the debt. So that is very important. Another very important thing to understand in regarding to debt we have to see is, it also, my manner in which I service my debt also affects my credit score. So when I am being appraised by bankers to give me future facility, unless and until my credit score is very good, I'm never going to be good enough, right? So every banker in today's world, when you have a bank account, when we have credit cards, when we have car loans, house loans, business loans, everybody is basically rating us. There is like a whole invisible universe which is looking at us and taking looking at us, and at all given points of time evaluating how reliable we are to give money, right? So that reliability is coming essentially from a standpoint of my credit worthiness. So when we are advising clients, or when we are even reviewing, see, everything that I'm saying right now will work in terms of helping you to evaluate, helping you to look at businesses that you want to start and invest, as well as advising your clients. But the other thing it's also going to do is going to make you aware of things that you need to look at when you are evaluating something. So whenever you're doing due diligences in the company, when you're doing diligence of businesses you want to take over, you will be looking at the same things that I'm sharing with you right now, because those are the precise things which will be the weak links in the armor of those entities, right? So what will you do? You will go to the RBI website and look at the list of defaulters there. You will see whether that entity is figuring out as a list of defaulter there. You will look at the promoter and see whether they are coming as a list of defaulters there. These are the techniques which are used by people when they assess businesses. They will go to the CRISIL, or they will go to CIBIL to be able to look at the credit scores of people. Now, there is of course an important part in terms of privacy. But in terms of when you take loans, there are certain waivers that we automatically do in terms of whether companies can share those credit scores with other companies and other things. So those are things that we may not even realize, but we are being assessed. All of us are being assessed. As long as we are in the money and making money, or taking any kind of loan or making transactions, everybody's credit scores are being assessed. Next comes equity. Now, why would anybody give an entity or a business money. One, out of love and affection, father's given money, aunt has given money, grandfather's given money, friends have given money, all of that. They want to see you grow, they want you to see good. That's wonderful, that's nice. So one money is the money which comes out of family where the conditions are not there. Whatever we want to do, either we can pay it back, we may not pay it back, we may give them shares in regard to the money that they have given, which is fine. But all other kind of money, everything else comes obviously with expectations. And those expectations are by way of returns. That whether it's loan also, the basic thing will be what is the amount, what is the purpose for which it is to be used, for how long is this payment being given, how is it going to be repaid, and the terms of repayment, interest and other things. That is as far as the debt is concerned. As far as equity is concerned, it is how much is the money, for what purpose it is going to be used, what will be the return on terms of my investment, what am I getting in terms of it? Because if I'm getting a share in a company and the company remains a private company forever, if you're a company like say a Godrej, it's a different matter because of the profits that you will make. And even if you're a private company, the returns in terms of the dividend that I'm getting is massive. And so I don't mind remaining in a private company, right? But if I'm an investor where my investor's horizon is 5 years, 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, I very well need an investment. Why? Because the investment funds are made out of essentially a kitty. That kitty is an investment of different principles which are putting in money in those funds. And they are doing it for returns. They are not doing it for charity, and neither are they doing it for some goodwill. So when the monies come in, they come in with conditions. Now, where do these conditions get documented? So whenever any money comes in, depending on the quantum, okay, whether it's private investors, whether it's private equity angels for startups and all of that is happening essentially when the money is coming in. It gets documented by way of agreements called the shareholders agreements. So the shareholders in the company decide terms and conditions which will govern the working of the company and the rights which get allocated to such a shareholder who comes within a company, right? So this entity is essentially then going to be looking and is answerable to the shareholders of the company. Now, depending on the quantum of shareholding that you get for the equity, now what will determine that very clearly? One, the value of the company. So the valuation of the company determines the value of the money that will get translated into the equity of the company. Higher the value, the multiple that is there for what you have, with the lesser number of shares that you will hold. Lesser the value, more number of shares that you will hold for the same money. So valuations become very important. Now, when you're looking at valuations, one looks at, especially in case of startups, how does these valuations happen? And that is very important because as lawyers, we'll need to advise them, or as business startups, we will need to understand how will our businesses get valued. First of all, the proof has to be in regarding to the product or the business idea that is there. That is one. Second of all, the capability of the person who has this idea or the team that is going to put together to implement this thing. They will also need to see whether there is a market, because I may have a most brilliant idea, right? But if it is before time, it's not going to work. If it's after time, it's already too late, right? So it has to be just in time for that my idea to germinate, to go ahead and do it. And the time to be able to convert from the idea board to the pilot to the final has to be enough so that I can be there first in the market, get the first mover's advantage. So by the time the competition even catches up with me, I have made that money, right? So when I'm looking at this, all of this matters. So when you're looking at valuation of companies are always valued on tangibles, the business and the intangibles. So especially if you have good copyright. If you have, say, if you're in a music company, you have a basket of music that you have, say, paintings, or you have other intellectual properties, like for example patents. You may have technology because of which you're holding patents. You may have a know-how. You may have the capability of creating platforms where you can do great idea can be done as an e-commerce business. All of that is going to matter as far as where the money is going to be given. Then after the business starts growing, very often what happens is it's not always possible to grow businesses organically, which means I can't keep growing, because if I keep growing at my own pace, it may take me 10 years or 20 years. In certain times, businesses catapult themselves into another strata by simply having inorganic growth. That is where you acquire the technology, you acquire the IP, you may collaborate with people, you may have joint ventures with people. From one business, I can split it and hive it off into two businesses, and both of them will start growing individually. I may acquire assets in business. So, at times I don't need to take over the entire company, because if the entire company, the risks are, one, I don't know what I'm taking over. So there may be so many inherent risks in the business that I don't know. Two, I may be taking over known, as far as the known issues, problems, debts, encumbrances, it's all fine. Unknown, I may not have. And as you know, in law, in certain cases, there is no statute of limitation. So where there are criminal liabilities or liabilities which have things like environmental issues, or issues relating to labor, or issues relating to director defaults, or issues relating to, say, sexual harassment suit, anything, those things are some things which will continue and will plague the company, the board. Those responsibilities are continuing. So at times you don't take over the company unless the diligence has been completely thorough. What you do is you take the assets of those companies, you take the know-how of the company, you may even take some of the employees of the company that you need. So these are the different options that are taken over in terms of joint ventures, when companies come together and set up another entity where they jointly grow certain things. So then their names are also put together, So when Mercedes-Benz came, when Mercedes and Benz collaborated together, when in India, so many, Colgate Palmolive came together. So many people came together and they set up businesses, their names came together, and everything grew from there. Collaborations, when they happen, you may be having a company in Germany, they may collaborate with a company in India in order to be able to sell products in the Indian markets, and also export products to Germany for them to sell up for the entire European market that they have. You have mergers where two companies merge as one, and then thereafter continue as a single entity. There is a whole universe of laws and process that is applicable for mergers, and one has to understand it. A lot of these mergers effect in a lot of offsetting of taxes, and from tax angle it can be beneficial. Losses can be utilized in case of going forward basis. So there are lots and lots of benefits in terms of mergers that happen in growing the company. For hiving off, a certain part of a business can be hived off or separated from. So if a company has 2-3 businesses together, one part of a business can be hived off and operated separately. Like ITC, you see that so many different businesses were born in one company as ITC. Now, the biscuits and other one is one part, soaps and everything is in another part. So each business can be hived off and operated separately. Then you have technology transfer and licensing. If I have a certain technology, I may be using it to be able to license it and cross-license it with other entities around the world, and get royalties in that regard as a constant, plus revenue share on top of it. You have acquisitions of businesses and assets which happen where there are certain businesses and assets which are useful for me for my own business, where already there is a manufacturing plant which can be used by me. I just have to refurbish it a little bit, and I save the time and effort to be doing, to be able to build it all over again. Likewise of intellectual property, I can take over certain intellectual property in where it's coming cheap. I may be having different people, stakeholders, which may be around the world sitting in different places. Today, they don't have many uses for those molecules or businesses or process technologies which are there. I may take it from these different people which are there in different jurisdictions and give them certain return over a period of time, and buy those, whereby the valuation of my company suddenly increases because I have now taken over the technologies which may be already holding certain patents and other things which are available overseas. So as far as regulatory framework is concerned, every business has certain framework in terms of the laws that are applicable, licenses that they need to hold, essential licenses for the business without which you cannot function. Licenses, we should remember, have a time frame, so they have to be renewed from time to time. And the licenses also have conditions. So you can function just by saying I have a particular license is not enough. The conditions applicable to the license also have to be maintained and prevailed and taken care of, so that over a period of time, that is something that is can be maintained. Otherwise, licenses can be revoked. A lot of times for construction of buildings and others, you may have seen where the authorities come in, the fire department comes in and says that you have breached the conditions of the license which were given to you, or the requirements of development norms that are there. As a result of fact, your license has been revoked. And then, there are conditions that are applicable, whether it even that happens even in regard to environmental licenses. If you are creating a lot of pollution, you're not remedying it, you're not reporting it, those licenses can be revoked. But, so it is something that one needs to look at it, and you need to have a framework. So you need to have people who understand these the framework that is applicable to you, whether it's a lawyer, whether it's a company secretary, whether it's a consultant, who will then look at it. So company secretarial compliances and policies, whenever you have an entity, and I said that, Companies Act would be applicable, you need to see whether SEBI is applicable, to see whether listing document, listing agreement is applicable, to see whether RBI norms are applicable, your basic business compliances are applicable. All of this is looked at by a company secretary. They make sure that the required number of board meetings in a year are conducted in the manner they have to be conducted. The company's accounts are audited, the audit committees and the internal board of committees, that's for the listed companies, but even for private companies, to make sure that the board is actually cognizant of what is happening in the company, checks and balances are met in the company, compliances are basically regularly followed. You have regular filings, like in the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, we have regular filings to be able to see that the filings in respect to reporting norms that are there are there. Board meetings have to be conducted and also reported on a regular basis with the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. If there is anything else, like for example, if a loan has been taken by the company, how it has been taken, what is the amount, what is the security given, all of that has to get filed with the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. So there are the various things that need to be looked at on a regular basis as far as a company secretary is concerned, including related party transactions and other things. Of course, the plethora of laws and the stringency of laws also increases as you come from the domain of private company to a public company to a listed or a listed company, or as a listed company. But the fact of the matter is, awareness and vigilance is required at all given points of time to know what needs to be done. Because if you don't follow the norms, if you don't do regular filings, your company will be defunct. And as defunct companies, there are very serious repercussions, not just to the companies, but also to the directors of the company. And we need to remember this from a standpoint of compliances and understanding of a regulatory framework is very important, Because, for example, if you know, a thing like this, that a check is given and check bounces, the repercussions of those in under the Negotiable Instrument Act in respect to the directors to the company are extremely severe. And hence, these are commitments that need to be followed by the company. The internal legal team, internal compliance team has to always report in, as well as inform the company in regard to what are their obligations and what needs to be done. Now, in terms of the, and this is just an overview, so I'm just going to run a few slides. You all can look at it yourself. In terms of the laws, this is just examples of some of the key laws that are there across different areas of work. So typically speaking, what happens is whenever you're looking at any businesses, right from the time that I will look at setting up my businesses and I'll get my approvals, to the time that when I'm looking at buying an premises or renting a premises and the regulatory framework that is required for that, each of this has a whole world of laws. This is just an indicative list of some of the laws that are there that one needs to look at when you're looking at labor related compliances. And under it, there are, you know, several laws and compliances that one would need to look at over a period of time. So I'm just going to run you through this. So when you're looking at compliances and issues that are coming as far as employees are there, one has to be very careful in first identifying, you know, who's a workman, who's an employee. And also to be able to understand the definitions which are there under the Industrial Disputes Act, definitions of employees who is under the Provident Fund Act, because those are the ones that will govern the whole framework of laws that are applicable. The contracts that we will do in terms of even the employment contracts have to be thought through in line of the laws that are applicable in terms of them, because it matters in terms of how they are taken on board, the statutory benefits that are provided to these employees, as also in respect of when they are leaving, that is when they are resigning or when they are being terminated or being retrenched, what happens, it is something, or being laid off. All of those have very specific legal repercussion. Some of the bases on which the employment law are structured are on the basis of the work taken by them, the number of employees that get appointed, and the quantum of the wages that are drawn by the workman or the employer. This determines the way in which the laws will be applicable to them. So this is just one of the slides which gives an example that, you know, the payment of bonus, for example, wages is applicable when you are 20 or more people, or when they are, and where they are people which are drawing more than, or when they are drawing more than 21,000 rupees or more salary. So anyway, there are different criteria. I don't want to take you all through each of this because it will take a very long time and we don't have much time. But this is just to give you an idea in terms of how different laws very clearly set out different criterias in deciding which law will become applicable and when. And what is also more important is it is not static. The situation is dynamic. So you have to always keep looking at it as how it is happening over a period of time. Now, when you're looking at intellectual property rights, we need to look at, you know, first of all, a framework to say which intellectual property rights has what requirement. Because if you don't know what the requirement of every right is, like for example, in patents and in design, before it is put to use, you know, you have to file those with the respective offices. Copyright, for example, comes into birth the minute it gets created. For everything else, for like trademarks or patents or design, it needs to bring it to life. You need to file it. So each of these need to be understood. Then, you know, then there are new laws that have come up, which are like the data protection laws and the cyber security laws, which started with the information technology laws in India. And then there is also the personal data protection bill that is there, as well as information. So today, not only the way in which we communicate with each other in terms of the IT framework which is there, information that is flowing through, but also how we treat the data that gets exchanged is very important. So this importance has come about to such an extent that the repercussions that are there to the company in either misusing that particular data are very serious, or if the data is not kept in a particular manner as required under the law, is very serious. So the entire plethora of laws like the laws relating to cyber crime, which is under the um, uh, Indian Penal Code, the law relating to information technology, which looks at various aspects of treating, or even in terms of Evidence Act. What happens is, when somebody is looking at issues relating to enforcing of confidentiality rights, or breach of security, or breach of copyright violations which have been happened, when people copy each other's emails, information, and use it for their own, or use it as their own, or illegally transmit it, then you have very serious repercussions of it. And the Evidence Act then requires you to examine that data in a certain norm. So the information technology law, coupled with the Evidence Act, coupled with IPC, will then determine the manner in which that evidence gets collected, the manner in which it is used. In case of personal data protection bill as well, the law is very clear in terms of deciding what is a personal data, and the thresholds that are required in order to be able to protecting them. So data protection and cybersecurity is one of the areas which has come about, which is very important from businesses, as you know, because cyber attacks can really debilitate businesses, and also breach of information, confidential information that happens during these cyber attacks has a far lasting impact. If in between, Facebook accounts were hacked, issues that happened where people's privacy, because you're keeping so much of information which is made available on a strictly need to know basis, and if that gets compromised, there are many issues that come about. Then you have, in terms of businesses, you have various different issues which are like issues pertaining to real estate. Now in businesses, what happens is, depending on the nature of business you have and the kind of benefits that you are looking at and the state you are in, there are various benefits which have been awarded to certain kind of specialized communes which have been created. It could be the special economic zones, it could be the industrial zones, the IT park, commercial bases, business districts. Now, in certain cases, they have also, as by way of giving incentives, they have given certain incentives in terms of the indirect and indirect tax benefits that the companies will get when they set up startups in this particular areas or regions. As far as exports goes, when you do exports in a special economic zone, there are a large amount of benefits that have been given. If you're looking at a situation where for IT, and where IT and ITES policy applicable businesses are there, you see a tremendous amount of benefits which are given by to those companies when they are operating in those specific areas. So those benefits can be stamp duty exemptions, could be there, many other things that will be benefits which will be given to those companies when you set up those businesses in those states. For example, we have seen, Amazon, Google set up large businesses and coming into India in different states, where the number of workmen that they employ are very high, and so on and so forth, and thereby getting many businesses, many benefits, and also status in terms of mega status, and so on and so forth. So in terms of property documents, you have a sale deed, where there is an actual sale and transfer of the asset from party A to B. Lease, as we know, where it is a long-term arrangement of 5 years and above. Lease can even be for 1 year as well, but from a stamp duty perspective, when it is beyond 5 years, even a license or document will be treated as a lease document. The benefits between lease and leave-in license are is something which, or the differences are something which any student of law who studied transfer of property would know. Leave-in license agreements are basically permissive users, and they are very specific and restrictive in terms of what can be done, can't be done. Then there are business conducting agreements where you conduct businesses, even like, for example, WeWork, where you can share premises. In one premises, 10, 20, 30 businesses are operating together. So you enter into a business conducting agreement where you conduct your businesses from a particular location. You can have a name board, you can use that address for registering the company and so forth. But there are different norms in respect to that. Then you have the services agreement and the co-sharing agreement. So the modality of what method we will use for our agreement would depend on the kind of business we have. Of course, we have to look at when there is property, stamp duty issues relating to exemptions, issues related to registration are something that we need to look at immediately. I think what I'm going to do is, while I'm going to run through these slides, since we are doing on the next Saturday the contractual framework, I think I'm going to leave this be, because that is something that we will look at in detail on the following Saturday. But essentially, contractual framework requires to be crisp, it requires to be precise, it requires to be able to be flexible, to be able to take into account situations that are not all contemplated today, and which sets out very clearly the obligations of the party and the repercussions if those obligations are not met. So these are some of the other contracts. So when we are looking at risks, essentially we need to be able to look at the different areas that risks can come through. So some of the areas, of course, are compliances and regulatory overview. Risk to the business itself, where, for example, right now because of COVID, so many businesses were disrupted because those businesses become, like if you had, for example, a multiplex, and because of COVID, the entire ability to go and use those multiplexes for months, already we are in the 5th month, even going forward, when we don't know when we'd be able to go and sit and watch a movie in a multiplex. So business can have a major risk of that nature. So everything about that business, whether such a risk was ever contemplated, matters. Reputational risk, which is there, financial risk, bankruptcy, contractual, data protection, cybersecurity, all the other risks that you look at, and especially the ones to the promoters, directors, management, and the business continuity. These are some of the ones that one needs to really think. Now, as you can see from this list, all of these risks have their seeds or the basis of it on the impact of any risk on any of us or the businesses is basically dependent on one, what was the level of preparedness of any business for the risks that they are going to face. Second is, what is the extent of the internal systems in place for it to be able to withstand that risk over a certain period of time. Third is, what is the quick mitigating steps that were taken by the business, by the management, by the team, that they did to control, to mitigate, to eliminate, and to manage this particular risk. What are the things that they did immediately from a regulatory standpoint to be able to take steps into action, to be able to mitigate the risk that may occur from a regulatory standpoint? What are the things that were done in a public domain by way of corporate communications and others to be able to mitigate the response of that risk at that time? So there are so many things that have to be thought through of. But to be able to do that, first, a risk assessment plan. So for any business, one of the most important things that we have always advised, whether it's business, individuals, what are the kind of risks that can happen, whether it is to individuals, whether it is to families, whether it is to companies, whether it's to organizations, what are the risks that can happen? and then to see what are the kind of steps you're taking to have a risk mitigation plan. If these risks happen, then what will happen? What will my next steps be? All of that has to be put into place. So basically, you have to identify risk, to be able to know how to manage risk, basically, to create robust compliance, regulatory, contractual regime, and also create robust systems in place. Sound decision making, you need to have the ability to make sound decision making with the legal framework, especially when the circumstances are very dire and difficult. When there is chaos, there is confusion, normally people panic. That is the time when people have to be trained of how to act in such situations. How is the proper record keeping kept? How are we able to remain coherent, calm at a time when everything is essentially going wrong? So that is essentially very important, to be able to respond to risk in this manner. These are just few of the trivia and facts which we've just put together, that in terms of businesses, do we know, in terms of businesses, that how much of businesses today prone to cyber crimes, where your data, your information can be accessed by third parties, how the laws that govern it actually protect that, how there should be an assessment or even ethical hacking, done, so that whether your systems are robust enough to deal with such an attack. Do you have your information which is kept safely as a backup, so that if something happens to your systems, you're not left high and dry? How organizations are required, if there are more than 10 people in an organization, to be able to have proper policies in respect to prevention of sexual harassment, to be able to have a committee, to be able to have conduct regular awareness sessions that are required, to understand what is the differences that are there, which will qualify people who are working for you as workmen under the Industrial Dispute Act, because that terminology affects how you terminate them, how you retrench them, what is the obligation to rehire them. When you start up businesses in Maharashtra or any other state, and when you have the Shops and Establishment Act, it is not only a license to be able to have a commercial use in a particular premise, but it also brings about norms in terms of, how many working days, how many holidays, how many people working, how they work, what really happens when they work, and the terms and conditions. So whether whether uh, whether you have IP, like for example, an unregistered trademark also gets a protection under a law, if or by way of passing off action. However, obviously there has to be proof of being able to, that it has been there as a continuous use, has goodwill over a period of time. Essentially, legal framework is something which enables people to be a far more aware, and your decision making is a far more based on informed basis, and which makes all the difference for businesses. So essentially, when you're looking at value creation for businesses, it is very important for whether it's lenders or investors or others, to be able to show that the internal controls are in place, internal checks and balances are in place, in terms of finances, in terms of when there's a maker checker mechanism. When you make certain things, somebody checks it and then does it. Of course, this is not possible for all startups, because the number of people involved are lesser, but one can work towards to put into these systems in place. The professional management that comes in is a competent management, is a trained management, which update themselves with the laws, with information that is there, and in regard to the details in regarding to their own businesses. So not only are they trained in respect to the specifics into their businesses, but the regulatory framework that governs their functioning in that particular organization. And also for business continuity, if there is a situation like COVID, or there is a unexpected demise of the management or the board or the promoter of the company, how will these businesses continue in the absence of one or two or the four of the key people in the companies? So essentially, if you're looking at key to success for any business, very clearly we have seen that you need to have a robust framework in terms of course, the business itself, what the business stands for, the regulatory framework that is required to be there, the contractual framework that is required to be there. One has to be constantly monitoring the changes that are happening in the environment and then assessing it, how it will impact the business, so that risk evaluation can be done on a regular basis of the business, looking at the legal, financial, regulatory framework of the company. Then, of course, adapting to the needs of the company. You may have certain contracts, you may have so many things, but if they are outdated, keeping in mind the laws that are coming in, the business requirements and the demands of the business, then one needs to constantly be aware of it, looking at the disruptive forces and the market forces that really drive a business. And then, of course, you need to look at the interests of all the relevant stakeholders. What is that is required to keep them comfortable, to be able to address their concerns, because otherwise stakeholders can create a lot of disruptions in the businesses by making complaints, by lodging litigations. And of course, finally, to be able to build a very bankable and a brand and a goodwill which can be relied on. Now, in all of this, one of the very important things that we need to know is that apart from all of this framework, there is this framework relating to action taken by third parties, through litigations or other complaints filed. So it's always very important that the advisors and the people who you advise and the people from whom you take advice, are people that are reliable, who know their subject very well, who advise you properly, advise you not only from a legal standpoint, but from a practical standpoint. Because for businesses, you can't only say that, you can fight the matter out in court. If fighting the matter out in court for years and years and years is going to be a drain on your resources, time and money, then it may not be the best option. We need to find solutions which are other than litigations, unless it's absolutely necessary. So this is the broad framework of the framework applicable to startups. And of course, there is a lot more, but as you start doing businesses over a period of time, one learns in any case. So thank you so much for this opportunity. And if there are any questions, I'd be very happy to take them.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a wonderful, detailed, elaborated, speech on this startup thing. Participants, if anybody has a question, you can put it in the chat box, because I'm not finding any question in the chat box. So if you have any questions, please put it up in the chat box.
Samvita, you can even
Yes.
allow them to raise their hands
Speak.
and come.
Okay, ma'am. Yeah? Okay. So anybody who wants to ask the question orally can now just, just a minute. Ma'am, if you could, thank you, ma'am. Thank you. If anybody wants to ask a question, can please raise their hand, and then we'll allow one by one to ask a question. Anybody who wants to ask, please raise your hand. Okay, so some questions are popping up in the chat window, ma'am. Vishal wants to know, how's the scope of CS course along with LLB in the future?
Okay, so the company secretarial course is a very comprehensive and a good course. Also, it is a course which automatically and very naturally trains you from a practical aspects in terms of what is required for companies. The benefit of that course is also because it's a mandatory requirement now for companies above a certain size and scale to be able to have even an in-house company secretary. It will always afford also an ability to look at it as a full-time career, in terms of a company secretary, whether practicing independently or practicing with the organizations. Even as a lawyer, practicing lawyer, to have company secretarial knowledge is a very useful and invaluable tool. So yes, it is something which is, if you can pursue it, it's always going to be at a very premium and advantage. Even when law firms assess you from a job perspective, from hiring candidates, if you have completed your company secretarial or you're in the process of completing it, it is something which will go a very long way on your CV.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. There's another question which says, is it necessary to start the business with a small capital?
I'm sorry, is it necessary
Is it
to?
start the business with the small capital? So,
No, without a capital, no business can be started as such. And so the capital can be intellectual or it can be in terms of tangible. So if it's intangible, you know, your capital could be your artwork, it could be your music, it could be your book that you have written. But in order, because for commerce essentially is a transaction, right? There is somebody who puts a value to something. So you need to create something for it. There has to be value. It can be whether you may create something tangible or intangible, but that capital you will have to bring into the business.
okay. Uh, how does the legal profession look like in India in the near future?
See, lawyers are always required at any given point of time, whether it is by way of business or whether it is by way of litigation, whether it is on a regulatory framework, judicial framework. So, law, doctors, teachers, chartered accountants, our engineers are always going to be in demand in a country like India because there is so much scope in terms of work. So the main thing is not really that. The question that we have to, or rather the point we need to understand is, if you're good at anything, you know, even if I'm a carpenter or an electrician or a lawyer or a doctor, if I'm good at what I do, I'll always have work and I'll always be in demand. So the question is, um, I have to make my skills really good. I need to give a lot for that. I need to study. I need to work hard. I have to apply my skills. I have to be reliable, and I have to do all it takes to be able to work in the interest of the organization or the clients that I advise. So yeah, the law. I believe that the future for young lawyers is very bright, and there's so much that you can do.
Thank you, ma'am. Next is, what exactly is business exit strategy?
So business exit strategy is when you're looking at there are two ways to it. One, in an investor's point of view, I have come and invested in your business, say in year two. I'm looking at a horizon to be able to exit with my investment with a return, right? So I will look at an exit strategy for me, say in 4 years or 5 years, where I allow your business to grow and then I exit by way of you giving me an exit by either buying out my shares, bringing another investor, or listing the company whereby I can sell my shares in the open market. Business strategy can also be business also can be from a point of view of a company where you can say that, okay, I've been doing a business of a particular nature, or four different businesses, and from here we are exiting from one business by selling off one thing. For example, Parley sold off their Bisleri business to Coke. So when they sold off the Bisleri business to Coke, they exited from that particular business, monetized it, and moved on, right? So business exit strategy is essentially exiting from a particular business either as an investor or as a promoter.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Another question is, would like to know how to select the type of firm to establish, like proprietary, private, or LLC, when the setup will be the distributor for overseas principals in terms for raising external finance.
No, but it all depends. Even when you're looking at external, when you're setting up a firm for raising external capital. See, first we have to understand whenever you're dealing with anything that is high risk, it would always have to be an LLP or a company because you need a limited liability. In case of partnership and others, the liability is unlimited from a partner standpoint. So to begin with, you need to have an limited liability structure, which would mean it has to be an LLP or a company. Now, depending on the structure that you want to have and whether you want to have future investors and other things, you will decide whether to have a LLP or a company.
Yeah, thank you,
But it will
ma'am.
have to be somebody which will have to be a limited liability.
Okay. So I request the participants to ask the questions which are related to the topic that we are dealing with today, and not something which is probably not very relevant to the topic.
But may I say one thing? Please don't
Yes,
stop me.
ma'am.
That's my
Yes, ma'am.
request. But the reason, I'll tell you why. See, sometimes a thought strikes somebody, and if I can
Sure,
answer it,
ma'am.
I will. If I can't answer it, I'll say I'm sorry, I can't answer it. I'll find out and I'll let you know.
Sure, ma'am.
But of
Sure,
course,
ma'am.
I'm only saying this from a standpoint
Yeah.
of see, there are two things I just want to share with you. See, question answers are a lovely way of everybody learning, because that's when you clear your doubts. However, it is also nice to keep in mind, that who the other participants are. For example, if everybody is a student and if you're asking a question relating to the specifics of a business, then it may not be so relevant. So that is
Yes.
something that as a value judgment, I agree with Professor that, we may want to keep in mind, but if it's so important, please
Yeah.
ask.
Okay. Okay. Ma'am, the next relevant question is, do you think there will be a mushrooming of startups due to disruption of economy on account of COVID?
So, yeah, I mean, let's put it this way. There has been a disruption of economy and businesses on account of COVID for sure. So, as a result, a lot of businesses have unfortunately gone under, and their relevance is being questioned. As a result of which, naturally, they are going to look at by themselves, look at new opportunities to survive, or even new people, for others also may look at new business ideas, because COVID will enable them to provide that. So yes, there will be huge amount of mushrooming there. The beauty is there is always an opportunity in adversity, and the ones who make the most of it will have gained from it essentially.
Right. Thank you, ma'am. There are no more questions, but one question which I felt was out of the box, but still, I would want to put it up to you. Do you think artificial intelligence will affect lawyers in future? That's the
No, it's
question.
it's a very valid question actually, and it's a question which, of course, lawyers will be impacted by art, use of AI in law firms, and there are many law firms which are already starting to do it, because as you can imagine, the work which is taking people so long in terms of research, in terms of analysis, in terms of basic documentation and framework, can all be done by AI. Okay? So then where does it leave us? That is the question. One, for all of that to happen over a period of time, it's going to take some time for it to happen, but it will surely happen. So it's going to deeply impact. So as since human beings are the ones who have created this technology, which enables uh, uh, the technology itself to be a thinking technology and find solutions technology. Human beings will have to be even more ingenious in trying to be relevant more than the technology, because being human is not only about knowing things and information and applying things, right? It has the ability to be able to bring in different skill sets in a manner where the judiciousness or the wisdom of a situation may not always be, the situation may not always be so black and white. Now, where the situations are not so black and white, it requires a lot more creativity, a lot more ingenuity to be able to come up with different solutions. Having said that, if you program a machine to also do that, I'm sure they can do it, and they can do it far more better and with a lot more crisp. So one will really need to look at it in that sense, whether it is the judges, whether it is the lawyers, whether it is people who are doing research on law, all of it. In that sense, all of that can, to a large extent, be automated. And it is going to certainly take an impact on it. However, there will be always areas of work in terms of law and other things which will require human interaction. What we are talking on, could take 10 years to have its full impact to be able to see, or even 5 years for that matter. But 10 years to see its full impact, 5 years to see its impact, really, undoubtedly. And it is something that is happening around the world in any case. But having said that, as I said, if you're very good at what you do, you'll always be relevant. So I think I would like to go with that.
Oh, thank you, ma'am. In case of liquidation or insolvency, what is the hierarchy of payment?
No, so in terms of the hierarchy of payment, one would need to really look at. Uh, I'll need to refresh this because between the statutory dues, for a fact, the labor dues, the statutory dues, and the dues to the lenders, secured lenders, are right up there. Now, between the three of them, which is number 1, 2, and 3, is for the courts, which will be looking at it. But these three, the statutory dues, the labor dues, and the dues, when I say statutory, means statutory includes even utilities. So it's direct taxes, indirect taxes, electricity board, all of those dues, all of the labor dues, and all the dues that are there to secured lenders will take the precedence over everything else.
Okay. Ma'am, the next question is how a Hindu undivided family business can do startup by forming a company if they want to associate with the company in foreign country.
So essentially, when you are looking at HUF structures, HUF can be the investor in the company. So that's not a problem at all. So the HUF is the one of the shareholders of the company, and you operate as a company.
Okay, right. Uh, okay. So there's a question that if as a layman, we are not much aware of the policies and various law points in depth regarding startups, what should be such person's initial startup if somebody wants to and is not much knowledgeable about this and he wants to start up, have a startup, then what should he do?
You should first of all not worry about whether you're a layman or not a layman, and so you need to start up that which requires lesser laws. Don't do that. Do a business that you enjoy, because otherwise it's not going to really work. And then study the laws that are required. I mean, I think if you see, basically for anything, as long as you have the interest and as long as you find it is necessary, you'll always find ways of studying it. You'll always find a friend who knows something. You'll always find a lawyer who can guide you. So there are business forums which guide startups and others. You should go to such forums where there are angel funds and others. Like for example, Mumbai Angels is one of them, where they guide startups, but they guide startups which have proper ideation, which is implemented, not just from the scratch. That is something that we have to remember.
Oh, okay, thank you so much, ma'am. I think that was the last question in the list. We don't have any more questions, and I can't see anybody raising hand to ask any question. If anyone has any question, you can still ask. We still have 10 minutes to go, so we can
No, no.
still wind up. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, that's fine. I mean, I think, we can, if there are any questions, you can always ask even the next Saturday, which is fine.
Sure, ma'am.
But
Sure,
thank you
ma'am.
very much, all of you. And I really enjoyed this session because, sharing with students and sharing with uh, people from different walks of life and discipline is always a very enriching experience. So thank you so
Thank you
much for
so.
giving me this opportunity. Thank
Thank
you.
you, ma'am. Thank you,
Bye
ma'am.
bye.
Ma'am, just a
Yeah,
second,
okay.
just a second. Yeah, we just need to wind up. So I would just like to call my co-host, Heta Chabia. She is from Dr. L.H. Hiranandani College of Pharmacy to wind up the session for the day. Heta, please.
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, very much.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Radhika ma'am, for sharing
It's a pleasure.
this explicit knowledge with us and also for the wonderful session. And I would like to thank all the participants for here to be here with us and with a lot of patience. And also Nilima ma'am, it is wonderful to have you here. And my co-host, Ms. Dabral ma'am. So thank you everyone for attending this session, and we would like to meet you for the next Saturday, which is 1st August at 10 a.m. So with
Yes, look forward to it.
Yeah, thank you,
this,
Heta.
I
Thank you,
guess
Heta.
the session is done.
Yes, yes,
Yes,
yes.
ma'am. Thank
Just
you.
just the last thing. That's the last thing, a formal thing. I would like our principal ma'am to come in and formally end the session. I see, ma'am. Yeah.
Samhita, you have made this a routine that the last word has to be mine. Anyway,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm very happy to have this last word. Radhika, it is just amazing the way you have walked us through the basic framework of
Yes.
startup by drawing our attention to a plethora of laws, regulations, and provisions. And I think we are really looking forward to next Saturday when we are going to study the basics of contract. I really enjoyed and I was impressed when you started by saying that one, we should know why we are studying something, because that makes us, it lends a purpose. And when you gave an example of the students who are studying for the purpose of exams and those who are studying for the sake of being good advocates. And I
Yes,
really
yes.
was impressed with your one more thing when you took the question answer session. You took up questions even on how an HUF could create a startup, but you went on to answer the questions on artificial intelligence. We had a 3-day webinar on artificial intelligence. So I was just wondering why this participant didn't raise the question at that time. That means you have instilled a confidence in him that you are capable of addressing these questions. So thank you so much, Radhika. We look forward to having another session with you on next Saturday.
Yeah,
God
it
bless
would be a
you.
great. Thank you so much, ma'am. It's such a
Thank
pleasure
you.
being here. Wish you all the very best, and I'll see you the next Saturday. Thank
See
you.
you with
Thank you.
all your
Thank you,
wishes.
Radhika,
Bye
ma'am.
bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
And haters, thank you very much for being the co-host. And please
Yes.
thank Principal Giddy on my behalf.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll
Thank
convey.
you all. Thank you
Okay,
all.
the last, thank you, ma'am. The last word for the participants, we are going to be meeting on 1st of August at 9:55. You all are going to be there with us, and we are going to start at sharp 10, and we'll be discussing on the further things that are there in the list. So thank you all for being a part of this session. We all see you on next Saturday. Stay safe till then. See you all. Goodbye.
Bye bye. Thank you.